Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Spark Your Fire. I'm your host, David Shih, and with me today, John Comino. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, David? David Shih, since we're using surnames.
The mate, the legend. I always have to introduce you somewhere, right?
Very
So,
nice.
as we know, 90% of the listeners on this podcast coming in for you. So,
I don't know about that. But,
Thanks a lot,
no, I'm very well. It's good. Yeah, we're doing it on a Thursday today. So everything's good.
For a bit of change, this will be it up. But having said that, the first day doesn't stop us from giving good content as well.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. Anyway, so yes, John, I mean, I have to say this is it's such an interesting market at the moment, and I hate to repeat myself the whole time, but the US CPI data that's been released earlier this week, which I think, it was showing very, very strong signs of recovery. In other words, I think US pretty much had their CPI under control now. Everything came back under expectation. If I could, I think because I looked it up before CNBC on the CNBC website.
Yeah.
The CPI in October increased 3.2% from a year ago. Okay, 3.2%. Now, the core CPI rose 0.2%, and then it was 4%. Okay, so core CPI sitting at 4%, but the forecast of that was 4.1%. So
Yeah,
basically, the CPI and the core CPI both came below market expectations. In other words, it's recovering a lot quicker. It's coming down a lot quicker, I should say. The annual rate was the smallest increase since September 2021.
That's the key.
2 years. 2 years. The flat reading on the headline CPI came as energy prices declined 2.5% of the month. I wonder whether Australia is going to follow the same soon with
we certainly will.
Prices. Yeah, offsetting the 0.3% increase in the food index. And basically, following the report, traders took any potential Fed rate hikes almost completely off the table now. So, I think that's going to be an interesting indicator, because we spoke a few times. The RBA has a lot of pressure to increase rates if US continues or Fed continues to push the rates up. Otherwise, the gap between the currency is going to increase, and it's going to impact our exports as well, right? So, and if I'm not mistaken, I think once the CPI data has been released, the US dollar dropped sharply, and the stock market rallied big time. On the expectation this is the end of the Fed rate rise.
Yep. Yeah. And I think they're right. And I think they're right.
Okay.
Yeah. So everyone keeps thinking. Okay. A couple of things actually. Where to start with this? I feel like a mosquito in a nudist colony. There's so much to talk about. But look, there's a prevailing. So the market thinks that the Fed is done with rate rises. I agree.
Yes.
The countervailing view to that is no. This is like the 1970s, where they thought they got on top of it, and then inflation came back and they had to go back in and raise rates again. I don't think this is the 1970s. We've chatted about this before, but there are two reasons why this is not the 1970s, and I think that it's going to be easier to kill inflation this time, although we have our own challenges at the moment with supply chain. The first reason why this is not the 1970s is we've got way more debt than then. This was the 1970s was the decade they went off the gold standard. So they had very little debt. Debt in the US is about 130% of GDP. Back then it was about 20% of GDP. So we have a lot more debt now. Second reason is we've got far worse demographics. So you had the 1970s was when the baby boomers were getting married, buying their houses, having their kids, and all that sort of stuff. We are not there. We're facing like demographic cliffs, and in places like Europe, certainly China, other parts of the world. Even so don't be fooled. Just because the populations are really healthy in Australia, that is not a global phenomenon. The global populations are not healthy. So yeah, do I think that the Fed's done? I think that the Fed's probably done. You always have to put the caveat probably, just so the language isn't too firm. Puts pressure on the RBA. The RBA, there was always a suspicion that there would be a December rate increase. I don't think that there'll be a December rate increase. And I think if the Fed's done, the RBA is done. About an hour ago, unemployment numbers came out and the unemployment rate ticked up. And sadly, our policymakers want higher unemployment to get the inflation rate down.
What's it on now?
I It's all very fresh, and I've been chatting to you since they came out. But we can have a look at it while we're chatting to each other. But the unemployment rate ticked up.
Picked up. Okay.
Yeah, and so the dollar's come down. And the reason that the Aussie dollar's come down since that announcement is because the market's starting to factor in that we're not raising rates either. But look, we'll see. To some degree, we do what we're told, and we do what the expectations are in the market. But I think we're certainly near a terminus rate. And one of the reasons why I don't think that a rate increase at this point of time is going to crush the real estate market is because every time interest rates go up, if they go up again, will always be considered the last time. So if rates go up one more time, we'll say that's the last one. It's the last one. And if they go up again after that, we'll say that's the last one. It's the last one. So the sentiment will be fairly optimistic, and the market would be right to be optimistic because we are, even if it's not the last rate, we're close to the top.
Yes.
So yeah, inflation's broadly under control, unemployment's ticking up, and consumer confidence is down. And sadly, these are the objectives. So mission accomplished.
Consumer confidence has been very pessimistic from memory. It's been even lower than I think pre-COVID levels at this point in time. And I've just had a quick look on the unemployment rate. It's gone back up to 3.7% in October.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so 0.2% increase because previously it was 3.5. Yeah. So the figures are starting to show the impact of the rate rises with having the RBA done all that hard work right now. So, okay.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I think it's a bit of a slight relief for the mortgage holders that at least it seems like the interest rate rise is off the table for December at this point. But never say never about February or March as the quarterly CPI data gets released in February. I think the RBA will then reassess in terms of what it happens then. But certainly I think the pressure from the Daddy US side of things is now a lot more under control. So
yeah, that's right. And to use this is like Austrian business. Like anyone who's done economics, you might remember your Ludwig von Mises or your Friedrich Hayek, but this is Austrian business cycle theory. And what that says is that even though it feels painful now, this is the hangover. The problems was the party last night where we went out and we got smashed and we kind of fell over and cut ourselves. And now when when we got drunk, that was 2020, 2021 when they lowered interest rates.
Yes.
Where this is the hangover, but it's the necessary hangover so that we can resume proper life, proper function. But it's painful. No one wants the hangover. Everyone wants the party. And so we're getting towards the end of the hangover now. So it's a good thing. I still believe that they'll break something, but it depends what they do next. It depends what they do after.
I do agree with you on that, John. I think, and I don't know what's gonna break. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone can tell. But having said that, is it too early to talk about reductions in the US side of things? Do you think they're going to bring forward the interest rate reductions on the Fed side of things as potentially early as mid-2024, potentially?
I do. So UBS, the Swiss bank, UBS came out about half a week ago and said that they have a sort of contrary view. They think that there are going to be 4 interest rate cuts the second half of next year, and that the Fed funds rate will go from about 5%. I hope I'm approximately right with that, down to about 2.5%. Wow. So a halving of the interest rate, and they're predicting some emergency cuts. So it'd be interesting to see if that prevails. That's not the prevailing orthodoxy in the market. The orthodoxy in the market is everyone's believing the higher for longer. I personally don't believe higher for longer. I think higher for longer is unnecessary because of the 2 reasons I gave before, demographics and debt, that they can't do higher for longer. But that's definitely the narrative until it's not the narrative. So I think I'm more with UBS, but I realize it's a bit of an outlier prediction, but we'll see. Yeah. So I would see steep cuts mid next year.
Yeah.
And hopefully if this video self-destructs if I'm wrong and goes down some Orwellian memory hole on YouTube.
Look, John, we have to admit it. If you're bold enough to make a prediction, then you need to stand against it, right?
Well, I'll blame UBS if it's wrong, but I think that they're broadly on the right track.
Fair enough. The other thing is, do you think 1 month of data could be an outlier at this point in time? So in other words, yes, we had a very positive data, but it's only 1 month of data. And, like, are we seeing a bit of false positive at the moment? Could the CPI started climbing back a little bit again next month when US, because we're heading into Christmas, right? So
yeah,
this good news might make people feel like, oh, this is the end of a rise. Let's start spending again because rates are going to drop as early as July next year. What do you think?
So, no, I don't think it's a one-off. I think it's a trend.
Okay. Good.
The problem is we're kind of backed ourselves in a corner. So I think the biggest risk at the moment in the world is sovereign debt. I think there's too much debt. I don't think climate change is a problem. I think debt's a problem. Debt's like an anti-productivity move. So it makes it very difficult to grow when you've got so much debt. And the reason why that's going to be problematic for inflation is not only that inflation in its truest definition comes from the issuance of debt, the printing of currency, but also because if there's too much debt, the economy can't grow. And if the economy can't grow, you can't grow into the new currency supply that you've created. So if you can't create more goods and services because there's too much debt and you've got to fire people and all that sort of stuff, your economy becomes less productive. If it's producing fewer goods and services, then it's hard to get inflation down in that sense. So that there's too much debt is a genuine problem. And I don't think that there has to be a reckoning. There has to be a reckoning. And Australia's actually quite well placed because relative to all the other dirty shirts in the laundry, we're okay. But debt is a ticking time bomb.
For the whole world, basically.
The whole world.
For the whole world. Okay. All right.
On that bright note, what else are we going to talk about?
John keeps circling back.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, that we keep trying to work out what it is, but
well, I mean, so you got to. If I'm right, then come up with your own way to hedge it, but you should always be optimistic. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, there are always ways to hedge, like potential debt defaults and currency crises and all that sort of stuff. So certainly not the end of the world.
I think it's about being cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Really. So
yeah, don't change your plans.
Don't change your plans. Keep plenty of buffers, as we all recommend you to do. So how if this does come true, so in other words, Fed start cutting rates in as early as mid to late 2024, and at this magnitude, how would it impact Australia, do you think? Is the RBA going to follow suit as well in terms of dropping a little bit? And because how last month, I think at the moment, everyone's saying higher for longer. They're not going to start reducing rates until 2025. I guess, would this sense of optimism now and seeing the latest Fed and US data, is this going to change the narrative in terms of our local economists again to say, let's put the rate cuts back on the table with the RBA. Here's when we think it's going to happen.
Yes. So if the US is still the reserve currency this time next year, and I anticipate it would be, and if they start cutting, then we would be cutting as well.
Yeah.
The way the monetary system works, to use a really crude metaphor, is that the world economy is the milkshake and the US is the straw, and they get to suck all the. It sounds terrible. It sounds parasitic, and I don't mean it to be like that. But capital gets attracted to the US because they've got the best capital markets, they've got the most liquid markets, and they've got the reserve currency. So, in a sense, when Malaysia does a stimulus package, a lot of that money ends up in the US because of currency pegs. So Malaysia's just an example, but a lot of the capital gets attracted into the US, even though it's printed in Malaysia or Australia or Japan or China, Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So America's a magnet for capital, and they're the reserve currency. So we're the milkshake and they're the straw. And so what I mean by that is, and I've answered in a bit of an indirect way, but yes, if they go down a certain path, we're going to follow them. And it doesn't have to be, we didn't raise rates as high as they did, but we still had to raise rates. And if they cut rates, we may not cut as hard as they do, but we'll still cut rates. So we would directionally mirror what they're doing.
In line, basically. Yeah. I like that analogy. Milkshake and the straws.
Oh, yeah. It's
Very
not mine.
true.
It's not mine. It's a guy named Brent Johnson. He's got this thing called dollar milkshake theory. You should totally look it up. It's fascinating.
Oh, okay, there you go. Something for our listeners to Google up. This part. So, okay, no, awesome. No, thanks, John. I think that's good to always get your insights in around things, especially in a changing world like this. So, let's change lanes and talk a bit about property in this case. Okay, so look, I think we are currently. I think for property buyers, in the last, I say 2023 is a very difficult year to secure property. Like, it's challenging even for buyers agents, let alone people who want to be able to do it themselves. And we're talking about both owner-occupiers and investors alike. Okay, so main thing was we've covered this a lot of times. There's not a lot of stock coming up. The stock is starting to be freed up into the market now, which is good. But there's still very strong ongoing demand. Okay, so I think for today's discussion, we want to be able to help those listeners who are currently looking to make an offer and to maximize their chance of getting an offer accepted. In other words, maximizing your chance of, number one, finding a property, number two, negotiating, and number three, securing the deal yourself. And, without... Obviously, if you don't want to do it, then we've got professionals like John who can actually help you. But at the same time, we're also very happy to share our own experiences and tips and tricks that you can take away in order to do this yourself. So, yeah. All right. So we've kind of break it down into a few key points or key sections, and we'll cover them as we go. But I think number one really is talking about, if you're looking at purchasing a property, you need to understand, and you always need to peg it. You need to come back to your goal. That's the number one. That's the number one key objective, right? Like, if you're not here to purchase a property, you're not here, and you're not serious, there's a lot better things that you can do in life rather than having to be there negotiating and speaking to a sales agent. So, you're not there to basically give someone a nasty time or to tell sales agent how they should be selling things, really. You are there to try to purchase a property, and sometimes, and that means sometimes you need to take your personal emotions out of it as well. Disregard, even though if you don't like the sales agent, and we know sometimes they can be quite sneaky, they probably sometimes could be not as professional as we all would like them to be. But don't forget, their key objective is to try to get the highest selling price for the seller. That's their key incentive. Now, once you understand that, don't be too offended when you try to make an offer in that sense, okay? Because ultimately they're there to get their job done as well. But if you put your personal emotions aside, and always, I think the easiest way to do that is to come back and say, I'm here to buy a property. So how can we get it to happen? How can you, as in the sales agent, and me, work together to make it happen?
Love it. Yeah. So remember, your goal is to buy a property. So your goal is not to teach the real estate agent a lesson, or you're not supposed to teach him manners or her. There's an old saying. A real estate agent told me the saying, by the way. He said something like, the people who succeed in real estate are the ones who buy. Which is, it's hilarious and obvious, but I have had clients who wanted to put offers in to stick it to the man and all that sort of stuff. Not here for revenge. If the deal's not going to happen and it's clear, walk away. You're there to buy a property. You're not there to settle a score.
That's right.
It happens.
Yeah. I think you'll probably see it more often than not, to be honest, John.
Well, guys get very alpha. Males get very alpha when it comes to negotiation, and they see it as like a test of manhood to out negotiate the other guy. It's not. It's a marketplace.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I think tagging on to that also, just be nice, be a person, give each other a bit of respect, because if you treat others right and you treat others with respect, you will get that in return as well.
True.
Yeah, basically. So, Okay, so that's our tip number one, basically, is to always circle back to your goal and you're here to buy a property. Okay. Number two, know your market. So this is maybe to do more with due diligence side of things as well. So John, why don't I let you to do a bit of introduction on this one?
So knowing your market, it's the biggest weapon that you have, actually, just being really knowledgeable in the market. And part of knowing the market, so knowing the market is comparables and all these sorts of things, but it's also knowing when to stop negotiating. It's knowing when the deal is done. So it's known to say, yeah, it's a great deal. It's also about knowing when the offer that is available to. So when some properties have a guide, and sometimes the guide is too low, sometimes the guide is too high. But you don't need to negotiate a deal where the asking price is already very low. You only need to negotiate the high priced asks, right?
Yeah.
So, but how do you know that without doing your due diligence? So know your market, know when to stop negotiating, know when to pull the trigger. Because negotiations can go on and on and on. You need to know when to pull the trigger when you've got a good deal. The other thing is, part of knowing your market is when you make the offer and you probably call the agent and then you'd follow it with an email so you get it in writing. Put recent comparables in the offer email. So substantiate your actual, I find this very powerful, actually. So substantiate your offer with some recent sales. So,
Right.
Due to this sale, we think that this offer is extremely compelling and, think you should take it, sort of thing. But you need to know the market for any of that to happen.
True. Now that's a great tip, John. Basically, substantiate your offer, and it could be with different reasons as well. Like this property could be slightly different, but it's on a bigger block of land, so therefore that's why
Exactly.
the condition is not as good as this one, or etc. So use that as a bit of. I think it comes down to explaining your rationale about the offer to a degree, and if you can make it compelling and justifiable, the sales agent is certainly willing to negotiate with the seller on your behalf as well, to say, look, I'll take it back to the seller. I'll come back to you and we'll let you know what their feedback are.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think it's also good that you, I think everyone get a good bit of glimpse in terms of how buyers agents usually negotiate as well.
Giving it away.
I know. All right. The other one, third tip, is to do with authority. So, authority, which is also an interesting one, John. I think. How do we position this? Do you have like an example which you could share?
Yeah. So sometimes you're in a negotiation, and generally speaking, negotiations I think should go fast, but sometimes you want to slow things down. And one way to slow things down is to appeal to authority. And this is something like, so for a buyer's agent, it's easy because I say I need to go back and speak to my buyers, right? But if you're not using a buyer's agent, you would say something like, I need to go and talk to my solicitor. Or another way to say it is, look, I think the price you're asking is fine, but the bank says it's not worth that. And so what you've done is you've deflected bad cop onto the authority, whoever that is. So the bank says it's not worth that. So I'd love to get a deal done today, but they're saying it's not worth it. Something like that. It's called good cop, bad cop. You're the good cop. The other guys are the bad cop. It's a way to appeal to some authority.
Yeah.
The caveat is never say I need to go and check with my wife or I need to go check with my husband. So that is not an appeal to authority. You do want it to be your solicitor or your mortgage broker or the bank or someone like that. But it's a very handy way to slow things down, and it's a very handy way to push back without you being the difficult one, because you want to be nice, right?
And when would you use this in that kind of situation? Like in terms of it, would you be using this? Let's say, for example, when you receive a counter offer from the sales agent, or what kind of situation?
You use it towards the end, towards the end of a negotiation. It counteroffer potentially, potentially. But usually it's towards the end when you're about to settle, and you sort of you kind of don't meet them the whole way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right. So that's the defecting to authority, basically, to be able to give you a bit of time as well to to absorb and to think about, okay, is is this offer compelling? Is this offer within my range? Is this, don't be driven by emotions, basically, to a degree. So give you a bit of time, buy you a bit of time, basically.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Next tip. I'll call this one anchoring, which is an interesting one, I think, John. So anchoring, I actually use this myself as well, even though I'm not a buyer's agent, but I could share this because I've used it in my latest purchase. When you're negotiating with a sales agent, obviously they got a figure in mind. In that sense, you have a figure in mind. What you generally want to do is you want to position them to meet you to whatever point that you want to. Generally speaking, I try to do it in midway to a degree, just to make it a bit more compelling. So let's say, for example, seller, you kind of know the seller wants around the 650K mark, you want the 600K mark. Okay, well, how do you guys meet in the middle in that sense, right? So you wouldn't go in with an offer that just goes 550, for example, because that's probably going to be too low. Let's say, for example, your final offer, you wanted to make it in 6, you want to make it to work for 625. Then you might go in and say, look, we know the seller wants 650. My offer was 600. Would the seller be willing to consider if we meet in the middle for 625? Now, you could do that upfront. You could do that later on. It depends on different strategies and depending on the market. But then again, I think, at least if you explain your logic, and this ties back to, explaining your substantiating your offer.
Knowing the market.
That's right. So, if you say, okay, well, I'm not trying to take advantage of it. I'm not trying to give you just a crazy lowball offer. Here's my reason, and I'm willing to meet halfway. Now, of course, the sales agent might come back and say, no, that's still too low. So, we want this and we want this, but at least it's edging closer to what you want. And in the meantime, you can also pull a bit of levers, which we'll touch on as well, in terms of different terms and conditions. Like, do they need a fast settlement? Do they need an early settlement? Do they, is it a divorce? Is it a mortgagee type of sell? Do they want they want fast, or do they want unconditional offers with Section 66W signed off with no cooling off, right? So few levers that you can pull. You might go, okay, well, we can do an early settlement, but I'm going to have to stick with my price. Would you take it or leave it? Or you might go, okay, well, there's levers that you can, you let go, but then you probably give them a bit more to make it up. So it's about finding that balance, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
John, what do you think in terms of anchoring? Have you got?
I agree. The only thing I'd add is anchoring is about controlling where the conversation starts, because you can't necessarily control where it finishes, but you can control where it starts. And the rationale there is that when human beings hear new information, we always cling to the first piece of information we get. So when you go into a negotiation, you want to set expectations that the price will be around here, not around here, right? So you give signals and hints up front where you're prepared to play the game, and they will come to you. Now, they will try to drag you away from it, but at least you're having a conversation over here, and you're having a conversation over here. So it's about setting the parameters, setting a range of an acceptable conversation around price, and you want it to be over here rather than over here. It's called anchoring, and it's just about saying what's acceptable to you early without being too obvious. And so, but early is the key word there. That's early.
Yes. I think if you set the expectation early, then you'll have a high chance of basically getting the deal done with that expected price as well. So okay. So that's about anchoring, which is a very key ingredient on negotiation, really. And actually, while we touch on anchoring, I think it also leads to the next point. John, you might be able to elaborate this. It's about control, or making the sales agent think that they are in control. Can I leave that one with you?
Let me give it a go. Yes. So this one's called the illusion of control. It's a general negotiation tip, but it came from a highly recommended book, a very popular book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Now, Chris Voss was an FBI hostage negotiator. So he was the guy talking the bank robbers out of the building and the people off the ledge. But he wrote a book a couple of years ago called Never Split the Difference. And the rationale behind the book was, I think, David, we've both read it, but I think
great book.
the rationale behind the book was, if you've got a life and death situation where you've got a situation where you get 10 hostages, you, in that negotiation, you can't say you can take 5 and kill those guys and we'll take the other 5. So you can't split the difference in that. You need to get all 10 hostages out.
Yes.
And meeting them halfway is equivalent to saying, all right, you kill 5 of the hostages, we'll take the other 5. That's to be a terrible negotiation. You got to get all the hostages out. So how do you get everything you want? And it sort of ties into being nice and ties into knowing your market and all that sort of stuff. But what he talks about is calibrated open questions. So you start by, you get them to do the talking. So you don't tell them what you want. You get them to do the talking, but you need to ask the questions in a way that is open-ended enough to find out about what they're trying to achieve. Some of these questions are things like, what about this is important to you? Or how do you want to proceed? Or you tell me, how do we solve this problem? What's the objective? And one of the best ways, the best question is when they maybe give you a price, you say, how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to do that? Pause, pregnant pause, and make sure that they're the next people to say that. And usually what they'll do is there'll be some form of capitulation when I say, how am I supposed to do that? Or how am I supposed to go back to my client and tell them the price just went up by $50,000? That sort of thing, right? So you, instead of saying, I can't go back to my client and say, the price just went up by 50,000, you say, how am I supposed to do that? So, and here's the key. The key to giving them the illusion of control is, what you want to do is you want to get them to repeat the answer back to them. And here's the key. You want to get them to say, that's right. Quote, that's right. What you don't want is to get them to say, you're right. So whenever I say you're right to my wife, I'm trying to get away from a prickly conversation. I say, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have done that. You're right. What we want to get to is that's right. When you've got them at that's right, they're bought in, and you can leave the conversation there and resume the negotiation after. But all of those, calibrated questions are to get you to that's right, rather than you're right. It's a great tip. It's a good book. You should read it.
Oh, definitely.
Not you personally, but listeners should definitely.
I think you've explained it perfectly, John. So that's very good. You pretty much picked the essence out of that book. So it could have saved our listeners a bit of time, but it was a really fascinating. I think I listened to it on audio book actually. So, it was narrated, and it was a very good book and very interesting content as well. Exactly the same situation as you said. You can't split the difference in terms of killing 5 hostages and getting the other 5 out. It's a do or die type of situation. So how do you ensure you get them all out? So, but there's certainly, luckily in life, we don't actually face.
And the book is written as a series of case studies.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Actual examples. It's actual examples of the.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. So, luckily, we don't get to see those life and death situations every day, but certainly a lot of things that we can take away from that. So, illusion of control. I like it. Very, very good. Okay. Next tip. Negotiating on conditions. So I think this one is what I touched on briefly in the previous point. There, basically, you want to understand a bit in terms of what's going to tick and what's important to the seller is how I look at it. I've already briefly touched on, was it a mortgagee sale? Is it a divorce sale? Is it a bankruptcy? Is it, have they already purchased another property as well? In other words, they've committed elsewhere, right? So every seller is of different situation at the time of entering into that contract. So as much as you want to be able to dig in a bit more and find out a bit more underlying in those. So, as an example, I think one of the properties I looked at previously was an elderly lady. She's owned the house outright. She's not in a rush to sell, so she just wants the best price. Okay, well, in that case, then the highest offer is really what's going to tick rather than all the other ones. Whereas, let's say, for example, it was a mortgagee sale or divorce sale, then they just want to basically get it done, get it sold, and then get the money into their bank account as quickly as can so they can split their way. In that case, you could potentially negotiate on a shorter settlement date in order to make your offer a bit more attractive, because they just want their money in the bank account, right? Want to get the dirty laundries out of the way now. So, and in essence, if you do that, you say, I'm going to give you a shorter settlement, but in contrast, I want a better price.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a give and take in terms of negotiating conditions, is the way I understand it. But
yeah,
I'm sure, John, you've got a much more insight than me on those.
No. So I agree. So you want to negotiate the little things, and the reason for that is give and take is the right expression. But the reason you want to negotiate little things is because you want to ask for things that you don't necessarily want, and the reason for that is you want them. Again, we're trying to give them the illusion of control. We want them to come out as though they're feeling like they won. So if you ask for something that you don't necessarily want, and then they say no, there's a concession. You've been a reasonable negotiating partner, and you've conceded to one of their wishes, but you only conceded because you asked for more than you were prepared to take.
Correct.
So it's about, if you negotiate inclusions and you negotiate settlement terms, you try to get a lower deposit. If they say no to 2 of the 5 things you've asked for and you agree, you've been a reasonable negotiating partner, and there's been give and take, which is what you want.
Yes.
So ask for things you don't necessarily want so that you can negotiate them.
Yeah, perfectly put. All right. Yeah. So as you can see, John's the one that's gone through a lot of battlefields here, right?
Oh, the scars. I've got the scars.
Exactly. The scars, mate, the scars. You hide them pretty well, though, for your age. All right. So that's negotiating conditions, all about give and take. And which comes to our last tip of today, never speak poorly of the property, basically. So I think that somehow ties back a little bit to our first point as well. You know, you're there to make the transaction. You're there to make the deal happen. You're not there to basically give anyone or any property a hard time. You know, if the property is in a terrible condition, people can see it, people know it. The sales agent doesn't need you to write a whole essay to say how crap it is.
Yeah, they know it's on a main road.
Yeah,
so you don't need to go, it's small, isn't it? Or it's on a main. No, they know. They're trying to do a job. So
exactly.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think that's just it's one of those common sense in honesty as well. But I mean, you might be surprised, like John. You know, you're I'm sure you're seeing a lot of these people coming in and try to somehow. I think the psychology is related to the alpha male a little bit as well. I want to be the dominant one, so therefore you got an inferior product here. You should be selling it to me at a cheap price because it's an inferior product.
Yeah,
that's not the right mindset when you try to get the deal done, right? You were trying to go in. So never speak poorly of the property. I mean, you know, yes, the seller and the sales agent always know what they're selling. They're selling into. I mean, if the seller has a wrong expectation, then the market will tell them that, basically. You know, if it's a crap house and they want $1 million or they want some crazy numbers for it, the market will teach them that lesson, because they won't be getting any offers depending on the market condition, of course. But you don't need to tell them the blinding obvious. I guess circles back again. If you are making an offer, be genuine, explain the rationale, substantiate it with the offer in terms of why you put in this offer. That's it.
Yeah, I've got a friend who is a real estate agent, and to give you an unrelated example, he hates it when people say, "Oh, it's on a main road. It's terrible. I'll give you whatever less." He says, "I know it's on a main road, and that's baked into the price. And it's like but you knew it was on a main road when you came to inspect the property as well. So don't come into the property knowing it's on a main road and then complaining it's on a main road. So don't shit on the property loud. It's bad manners. There's no need for that. And everyone knows what you're complaining about because you're right. So." Yeah, I mean, you're still right, but it's just right. It's unnecessary. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So okay, good. Shall we throw in a bonus tip, John?
Sure. Yeah.
I think a bonus tip we could chuck in here as well is related to how quickly should the negotiation process be, in essence, and this is where I probably need to draw on your experience a little bit, John, but The precursor here is depending on the market conditions as well. So if you're looking at a property in Perth today, as opposed to a property in Canberra or Melbourne, which is, very quiet at the moment, the negotiation skills that you use and also the negotiation period that would take could also be very different. In a very competitive market, you might want to move quicker and you want to go straight to it. Because there's not going to be second chance. Like in Perth, I think hypothetically the days on market might be less than a week at the moment. So you only got one shot at it, and put in your best offer, run and go, oh, do you know what? I know they want this. I know I want this. So that's me in the middle. No, it's not going to happen. So, so the negotiation period would also be dependent on the actual market condition and how much competition you have. And John, this is where I rely on your experience. In a hot market, how quickly do you want the negotiation period to be? Do you want to be within a certain period, like within a couple of days, within a week, or what will be the general guideline here in terms of what you would do?
Yeah, so generally you want to negotiate quickly. Think of the multi-millionaires. They're not out there like spending heaps and heaps of time. What they spend their time on is selecting the right asset, be it a business, be it a piece of real estate, but they don't negotiate it for that long. And if you're miles away, that they walk away early. So generally speaking, time kills deals. Mm-hmm. So you don't want the negotiation to drag on for too long. It invites other people. But generally speaking, I want my negotiation to take a couple of days, let's say, no more than a week. Although, I mean, there are exceptions, and it's happened in the past where it's gone over, but I want it to be maximum a week, and I don't want it to go over a weekend, generally speaking, because then it goes quiet. There's another inspection. Yes. So if it's a Wednesday, I want the negotiation done by Friday.
Correct. Yes.
But if it's Tuesday, I still want the negotiation done by Friday. So that gives me an extra day. But I don't want the negotiation to go to next week.
Yeah.
But time kills deals. If you know what you're buying, you don't need to. You either walk away or you buy it. I mean, you could make an argument, and I agree with you that in a slow market that's in slow decline, you can drag the negotiation out, and that's true. But generally speaking, you want to get the deal done, move on with your life.
Yes.
Renovate it or whatever you're going to do. In a hot market, you just don't have the choice to move slowly. You don't. You need to move quickly.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you, John. I think that's pretty much a wrap. But I'll do a recap in terms of the tips. We talked about the goal. So always make sure your eyes on the price. You're here to purchase a property. You're not here to fluff around or give someone else a lesson. Know your market. Do your comparables. Know what you're putting through. Is it within the range? And always make sure you substantiate your offer as well with comparables. Authority. So we talked about authority. Basically, if you are being ambushed with a counter offer or towards the end of the negotiation, if you need a bit more time to think it through, you can always use, I need to speak to my broker. I need to speak to my solicitor. Oh, but the bank valuation doesn't show that. So to drag it out a little bit, buy yourself a bit more time to be able to more on the actual counter offer. Anchoring. So, we spoke about anchoring. You just want to make sure that you are setting the expectations up front and also making sure they are playing within the range that you want them to play, and try to meet in the middle as well. It's not always going to be a win on a complete win on one side. You want to make it a win-win situation on both sides. That's the idea. Illusion of control. You've explained it so much perfectly than I did, but all I'm saying is that's it. That's right.
So that's it.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. Not your right.
That's right. Not your right. Right. So the key takeaway on that, and that doesn't have to apply just to property. It can also apply to relationships as well. So, John, when are you going to become a relationship consultant?
God, divorce would spike. We don't want that.
All right, and then we've got negotiating conditions as well. So there's certainly a lot of tweaks that you can do in terms of making the deal work. So always work out what you don't need and use that to your advantage in terms of negotiating and making offer. And second last, never speak poorly of the property. We all know what the property looks like. Everyone can see, everyone can feel it. You don't need to tell the sales agent, or you don't need to put anyone down or any property down in order to achieve the outcome that you want. So pretty common sense one. And also our bonus one, negotiating. So in terms of the timeline, try to get the deal closed quickly. Time kills deals, basically. So take away with that. Awesome. All right. Thanks, John. Anything else you want to add?
No, it was awesome. I mean, yeah, good one. Good one. Nothing to add.
Lovely. All right. Okay. Well, that's it for another episode. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today, and have a lovely week. And we'll see you again in another episode of Spark Your Fire. Cheers, John and David.